Hi, this is Paul, and this is Mark D. Parker, the serial killer, Cereal. He uh devours Captain Crunch and things like that. Now he's looking confused. Maybe like some other boomer who won the election. So
I've got a blue button that says OK on it. Should I click on it?
definitely.
All right.
If you don't click on it, then you get booted out because Zoom thinks that you don't understand that you're being recorded and it's
Gotcha.
trying to safely keep you from being the victim of me, I suppose. So I'm not going to do a randos conversation with Mark because if you go now, the reason I always say Mark D. Parker is because whenever have to search him on YouTube, if I type in Mark Parker, I get all these other things. But if I type in Mark D. Parker all run together, it goes right to his channel. So
Nice.
that's how that works. And Mark self-randoed himself in a really excellent way on his. Is that still up on your channel?
Yeah. Yep.
And
Both the
so
originals and the edited one.
you
Yep.
can get Mark's whole story, and it's an incredible story. So at the I'll risk the fear of nobody being interested in what Mark D. Parker has to say because they haven't heard his incredible story. If you hear his incredible story, you'll be very curious about what he has to say because he is really one of the more interesting critters in this corner, which might surprise you because looks like a pretty normal guy and he even, manages his facial hair unlike me, although he told me
Comes and
yesterday that
goes.
people when I trim my beard, people often complain because oh, he trimmed it. But usually I trim it because of a mishap because I'm trying to trim it and I like cut a swath through it. So it's like, all right, it's all going away. And that's what happened to Mark. Mark was just in
So
Connecticut
just
at my sister's place, and his beard looked beautiful. And I complimented him on how well he had groomed it. But it's actually rather difficult to keep these things symmetrical.
indeed.
So
Indeed.
anyway, I've talked too much. I gave Mark a slot, and I don't remember what we were going to talk about, but I don't think we'll have any lack of things to talk about. So,
I'm
so we'll
sure.
start with you, Mark. What do you want to talk about? Why did we decide we were going to talk today?
Well, I initially pitched after you had Corey on, I had pitched an idea of affiliating multiple online church plants with or pastors willing to work in this space with the corner, with from the full range of Christian traditions and beyond. Frankly, it could probably keep going with it, depending on how much flexibility the space can tolerate. Um,
Now, I think before we get into this, we should do a little bit of randomizing you
hmm.
because Mark's church story is super weird because he is back in church because a non-Christian guru told him to go back for the most part. And when he went back to church, he started going to a church that doesn't really seem to fit him. But Mark is very easily in church because he's a kind of like Elizabeth Oldfield, a cry on the floor, speak in tongues, raving charismatic in some ways. So Mark, and now you want to talk about church. So talk a little bit about what you think of church and why you go.
I can make this sound really somber. Well, Ron Comperba and I are going to start a new series or a new show on my channel called The House of Woo.
It should be how old is Ron?
It's
He's
just a little
probably
older
about
than
our age,
me.
isn't he?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's in his 60s.
Should be the Boomer House of Woo. That would make it even better.
Well, we want young moves to come in too.
Yeah, but
Um,
but we just took over the country yet again, another Boomer president. So
just nonstop. Can't get him.
we don't
Can't.
die, we Boomers.
That's Um, we're gonna live forever in our diamond houses and our what was that skit that Michael
I
clipped
know.
from
It was
in our
great.
robot bodies.
Yep.
Uh, I'm here for the woo. I'm there for the woo. I'm here because you could say God sent me. I as I see it. It's always the caveat. I don't presume to say speak for God. I just my best understanding of God and the Holy Spirit's leading. That's why I'm at that church. It's a Church of Christ. It was my late uncle's church for decades. His son-in-law now leads it. His daughter plays the piano. She's my age. They are my age. I went to school with my pastor from the sixth grade through graduation of high school.
Wow.
We lost track of each other when he went off to Annapolis and I went off in my direction for many years. Um, when somehow we ran into each other, back into each other somewhere along the lines on Facebook, saw that he was unmarried and available. My cousin was unmarried and available. I said, and it turns out they went to school too, actually, even going all the way back to kindergarten. They attended the same primary school, private primary school together for a while. Anyway, so we've all been in the family for a very long time. And I said, you guys should ping each other or something, just see what's happening. Next thing I know, they're getting married. So they got married, and now he's in the family, and he's also my pastor now. As because I got it, I in February, I was involved in a dog attack, and it broke my shoulder. Well, in the emergency room, no doubt high on opioids beyond belief. I
Doctor
got a
prescribed
doctor
opioids.
prescribed. Oh yeah, no, they pumped me so much I went into seizure. They weren't used to apparently somebody who's not adapted to it because I hadn't taken anything in ever. And so it was it but in the course of things I heard some scripture from the Lord deep and it was still influential. One of the scriptures part of the message was show up more with Paul. I'd already started supporting you, but I was listening to you and CW when the attack happened. And so anyway, part of the message was with you. Part of the message was see if they want to well, see just text them and see if they'll let you go to their church. And they said they did. They wanted me back. I said, okay. Yeah, they know what they're getting. Okay. Um, so I need to turn off notifications. I'm sorry, Paul. Um, so that's why I'm there. I'm there for the woo. I'm not there for the woo. I'm there because of the woo.
Right.
The Holy Spirit led me. That's why I'm there. I'm Holy Spirit led me. That's why I'm here.
Even though they're not a real wooey church.
No, Church of Christ.
No, Church of Christ is, well, I've been around some churches of Christ, so they're pretty
Stone
standard.
Campbell. These
Yep.
days, yeah, pretty standard. Originally, my uncle was very biblicist.
Yep.
But as I've discovered, if you look up a beautiful man who's a professor, doctor of history at Abilene University, I think, or Abilene College, it's a Christian Church of Christ church university and seminary, and he's Doug Foster. He's very much into church unity, and um, he's there are moderate voices that less fundamentalist voices now arising because like all the churches the traditional Protestant churches they're suffering from depletion of attendance and voices like his are being elevated I think so that's why I'm there and well and it's ironic just a little secret between you and me and the internet my my brother-in-law has a background, not brother-in-law, my cousin-in-law, my pastor, also attended the vineyard for quite some time, and
Oh, there's some woo.
there's some serious, well, I have some vineyard in me,
Yep.
and John Wimber
Yep.
particularly, and so he, although we was just talking about last night, he got a word. This is woo, more woo, guys. Embrace the woo. He got a word from the Lord that said about 11 years ago that you're done with this stage. We're gonna move on to something else. You're gonna move on to a different direction. Well, he's in a different space because you know, it would be great. We have an elderly congregation. It'd be lovely if they were there and we could pray for them with some faith in healing and a little more Holy Ghost would help everybody.
Yep.
But it's tough. It's little. You got to work gently and
Yep.
take everybody where they're at. So that's why I'm at that church. Did I answer your question?
You did. Hang on 1 second. So one thing you and I share are little dying churches full of older people that will probably not be saved, but
The people are saved. The churches may not be saved.
right, right. Yeah, they will go to glory. I'm not worried about them,
No.
but the institutions are passing away, and in many ways that those forms of institutions are passing away. And what I love about your story is it's not just this impersonal little dying church that you go to. These are your friends and family. And so it's very much as many of these little churches are, because it's that realm of church that is passing away. Mega churches are still going fairly well, and tiny little house churches are going well. It's sort of these in between cat-sized churches between 50 and 200 people that there's really no market for them anymore. They can't compete with the megas. They can't compete with the house churches because the house churches have something and the megas have something. And these little churches, they don't have programs like the megas, and they don't have the level of intimacy and quirkiness like the house church. So they're struggling right now in this particular church marketplace. But it's interesting that you drew an interest in this question of online church. And I've never tried to style anything that I've done as sort of online church, but it is, part of what the reason Corey came, the reason Corey came was something is going on in this corner it's definitely online and it's definitely church-ish. And so, when Corey is just sort of, you know, online church, I sit back and I look and I think, oh, this is going to be interesting to watch. So I don't know how you feel about that. So what sparked
Well,
your interest in there?
what my thinking has to do with one, your limitations, right? There's only so many hours in a day, so many videos you can make, so many randos you can have, so many private phone calls you can field, right? Um, and if this thing is going to grow, I'd say you're already beyond your capacity, at least sometimes of the year. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
all 12 months of the year or not, but
Like I don't
I
have a sermon this week because I'm going up to Washington to help start the estuary. So that frees up some time this week. But there's other church things that I do in that other time too, because that's what a small church is like.
right. And small churches, it's really strange. From what I can see, they can be more demanding on the pastor's body, mind, time than big churches because there's nothing, no layers between him and the congregation.
Right. There's no staff.
No staff. Yeah.
And
And even if there's laity that can help, their skill sets are limited. And in my case, they're also old.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening to living stones. The question of survivability is new leadership,
Mhm.
because suddenly you need just a certain number of people and things to run a local church. And like, you used to have volunteers who could fix things and run things. You no longer have that anymore. So more and more of that falls on me.
Mhm. So my idea was that just struck me when you and Corey were talking. Well, you got one guy already. Okay, so it's CRC. Maybe there's a Baptist out there who might want to come in and play in our space. And the idea would be, or a Catholic, or I mean, in the Catholic situation, it's more complicated. Same with the Orthodox because they have a real hierarchy.
Well, we've got
And
Father Eric.
you do have Father Eric, so you can direct somebody, right? Somebody wants to talk, but you don't have time to talk. And if they're Catholic, you can maybe say, well, Father Eric's a certain kind of Catholic. Go talk to him. There might be, say, a kind of Catholic who is more Pope Francis style, little more winsome. Maybe maybe we could have a deacon or somebody. You could direct to that person. And that would be part of this little, see the flotilla within the flotilla, only these would be specific. They could be as Corey imagines, an actual church plant online, or it could just be pastors affiliated with the corner to support your work that you're doing here to help with it would I don't know why they couldn't do randos for the public, but they could have I have people calling me wanting to talk to me privately. Some of them just want to talk. Some of them want to counsel me or correct me. Some of them want to support me. Some of them have questions and want my advice. Well, dude, I mean, because of my background in mental health issues, that is dealing with my own mental health. Uh, People want suggestions, ideas sometimes, and I'm not qualified. And it makes me very nervous to give any advice on that. But if I had somebody, a social worker, a qualified social worker, an even-tempered social worker, a trustworthy psychologist, just counselor, um, pastorally, and see, pastors get training in some of this stuff, right? Depending on the pastor and the background. I mean, some of them have very sophisticated backgrounds in counseling. We, you, they come to you, Paul, I want to talk. I want to talk. I don't have time to talk, but I have Pastor Fred. I have Reverend Jill. You know what I'm saying? And then what I imagine that to keep it, you wouldn't have to, it could be as loose or as tightly constructed as you like, but maybe you guys could confab. The idea would be once a quarter, something like that, where you just get together, have a 2 hour back and forth like you do in these groups.
Yeah.
And so that, and then you could actually ease the burden off of you and distribute some of the weight of the actual pastoring, because I get the impression just from my small amount of experience that there are a lot of people in the corner who actually need pastoring because they're not in church.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what churches they're not in the kind of relationship with those churches where even if they have resources, they're not accessing them.
Yeah.
Or if they're like my church, they don't have the resources.
Yeah. I think that's true. A lot of what and a lot of what has happened has been that others have picked up the slack. I mean, Chad has done a lot of randos. You're doing some things that are rando like. Seabax has picked up a lot. Grizz has some. And so in some ways the vacuum is relieved by more sort of pick up the slack. Now you're right in that there isn't um these people don't aren't necessarily trained in this, but that's also very church-like, because that is sort of what happens in churches. And part of the reason part of the reason, the estuary protocol, I think, has a place is because here's a little secret. Most of what I contribute, even in a pastoral care context, is listening, not advice. And if we can actually train, again, this video with this Trinity Forum video from Pepperdine with David Brooks and James Davidson Hunter. I mean, Brooks was making the same point that the vast majority of what the vast majority of people need for the majority of their neediness is care and attention.
Hmm.
Now, there is a sliver where a little bit of trained expertise, professionality could go a long ways.
Well,
That is true too.
marriages in particular are one area where it seems to me everybody's got advice. You got unmarried people giving advice about marriage. You've got
Now, between us, we've got how many years have you been married?
30, 34. It'll be 30, 34.
Yeah, I'm 36. So between us, we got 70
We're
years of marital
closing in on
experience.
a century.
Yeah, yeah. And what's interesting is that it's often the case that the more you know us, the more you know about something and the complexity of it, the more reticent you are to sort of give cheap advice.
Mhm. But the stakes are so high.
Yes.
And so where the stakes are really high, it's not just a rando anymore. It's not just, I need to get this off my chest or I need to sort this little philosophical problem out, but you're determining the fate possibly of generations. And boy, it'd be nice to have some professional support, some professional support for some people in these moments where they could use a little extra. And
Yeah.
a pastor comes in, I think if they're proper, they come in not just with professional advice, but they come in with an anointing. Um, sorry for the woo, but they come in with an anointing that gives them an extra level. If they're properly oriented, they have more. They bring more to the table, so to speak.
I don't know. In my experience, so I've seen a lot of people go to therapists,
Hmm.
and it's really a challenge for many people to find the right therapist and to find the right. I've seen so many misses, and I've seen people go to therapy and the therapist makes things worse. Um, so I'm not anxious about not having enough trained people in the system. I'm more concerned with having enough people in the system that have learned enough to prioritize listening and be careful with advice giving. Because for so many people, people are pretty amazing in terms of people will find eventually what will help. Now,
Hmm.
they'll have a lot of, and this gets into your journey with mental illness and mental health because your story, although very unique and idiosyncratic, your story still bears to me the wisdom that I've seen that I mean, you did a lot in terms of finding your place to stability and sanity. You knocked on a lot of doors and you went down a lot of rabbit trails, but a lot of this is the accumulation of wisdom. And whereas I'm sure with everyone who has had to sort of self-guide their healing journey, looking back on it, you can say, I wish I hadn't done this or I wish I hadn't done that.
Mhm.
But the process of elimination is so often a really integral part of the healing journey.
For individuals, it's one thing. If for a couple, it's another. I was blessed with a wife who's um, stubborn and endured with me. Um, and the only marriage advice I have for young men would be what I gave it in Connecticut, where I said, she's the hill you die on. I just am not. And that had some pushback to it, but it's. I think it's if that's not your approach, you know, um, it's well, I can't say. What I'm gonna say though is that well, my wife had a similar attitude, I guess, because I put her through. As I said, I probably shouldn't use that language that I used in Connecticut, but I said I'm a hard person to live with, or I have been. Taking me from my very beginnings. When we first got married, I was 26, heading fast to 27, and an undiagnosed person with type 2 bipolar disorder. I've been living with it since adolescence, and uh, it had gotten progressively worse. And on our honeymoon, everything's great. We land in San Francisco and suddenly inundated with homeless people. Whatever it was triggered the depression. And in the middle of our depression, I'm in a cripple. I mean, in the midst of our honeymoon, I'm in a crippling depression. Um, so she's probably at that point wondering, what did I sign up for? On the other hand, there was a lot of love, um, a degree of passion that gets things started, I suppose. But the love, and she's also a person of profound character and stubborn, and um, so yeah, it was, and she was willing to go for the ride to let me figure it out all the way from going, it's one point, I'm probably, how old would I have been? Yeah, it was only a year or so, year or two into the marriage. We're attending the vineyard in Anaheim. Wimber's still alive at the time. And I'm running a business and I cannot get the devil to stop talking to me. I'm working all day. I was shoemaker, so I'd work with my hands, so a lot of time alone. And when I say the devil talking to me, was it audible voices? I don't know. It's awfully close to audible, but I would say no, it wasn't quite. Oh, there's someone behind me. No, it was more. It's all in the head, and just condemnation and just you know you're worthless. It's worthless. It's not. It's just this boom, 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 boom. This daily sort of uh, negativity that just could not shut off from morning till night. And so we're going to the vineyard. You keep all this inside. Nobody sees what's happening. This is what's
Exactly.
happening inside.
Yep. Yep.
And so one night we're at the vineyard. It's ministry time. If you're acquainted with the vineyard, it was music, sermon, ministry time.
And you should explain to people what ministry time means.
In the vineyard at that time, it probably is still like this to some degree, but at that time, you had laity throughout the congregation trained to pray for people and minister to their needs,
Yep.
basically,
Yep.
for healing, for support, emotional, physical, you name it.
We had the
And
same thing.
so,
We did the same thing in our CRC church in Grand Rapids. Had a whole bunch of charismatics in that church, and we did
okay,
the same thing there. So keep going.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So what? And then so everybody you need help, stand up or raise your hand if you can't stand, right? And people around you will come. Well, I did. I just did it. I bolted up. I'm going to do this. I'm going to stand up. And suddenly I have a guy whispering in my ear, three other people all around me. Don't know them. I couldn't picture them, pull them out of a crowd. Never saw their faces as far as I could tell. I don't, at least not in my memory. And guy whispers in my ear because it's loud. There's like 5,000 people in this auditorium. All these people talking. And what do you need? I said, just said, cannot get the devil out of my head. I can't shut him up. Okay. Boom. Next thing I know, somebody's got their hand on my head. Somebody's got their hand on my heart. People got their hands on my back and they're praying, some in tongues, some in English, maybe some in another language. I don't know. It's a cacophony. It's glossolalia or whatever, you know. It's it's a holy gibberish. And I just go into a kind of semi-trance state. I just felt my head go back and I'm elevated. I don't know. I'm just in a different space mentally. Next thing I know, they're done. They're gone. They're off. Nobody asked me, "Are you okay?" Nothing. They just
Really?
said, "Nope." They had coordinated between themselves. My guess is they left me in a kind of trance state. They call slaying of the spirit or something.
Yeah.
And they saw, well, because this is very common. I didn't fall. I didn't lay down. I didn't sit down.
Mm.
I just stood like a board straight up.
Oh.
And my guess is there was a few minutes of that. It was
Yep.
not uncommon for them to just let somebody lay there. If they got slain in the spirit, you'd let them lay there and let God do whatever he's doing.
Yep. Yep.
And and if somebody starts shaking, what are you going to do? You let them shake, whatever. Or if they going to sit, whatever. It's going to sit or cry or laugh. You just let them do whatever is happening. You leave it alone.
Yep.
That was kind of the training. I did some of it. But
Yep.
anyway, later. Um, but I come out of it. The wife's looking at me like, no big deal. Didn't to me, it was a big inner traumatic, mind-blowing experience. And as far as she's concerned, I didn't see anything. I saw you standing and then you were done and you sat back down. And I did. And we on the way home, it's like dead silence in there. Just gone. Just everything. That voice was gone. Now, one of the ironic thing with all this, depression actually got worse after. In retrospect, I should have gone back for the depression and gone back and gone back and gone back. That's the lesson.
Yeah. Yeah.
I should have been more. I should have been like one of those parables, you know, the was it the widow or who keeps nagging the judge,
Yeah.
or
That and Jesus, well, what do you see? It looks like trees walking around, and Jesus goes in a second time. Even Jesus
see,
goes in a second time.
yes, yeah. So now I know, but then I thought, see, here's the funny thing is admitting we have all ha we everyone has these layers of conditioning and barriers, and it was probably more shameful to admit to serious mental illness than it was in this context to admit to being uh, uh, under a spiritual attack.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
in the 90s at that time, this would have been early 90s, very early 90s. I was it would have been really hard to admit to my parents that I had depression. I resisted that for a long time because it was very
Wow.
shameful. You did
Yeah.
not, even to this day, my mother has dementia and shit's like, I'm not crazy. I know you're
Yeah.
not. It was a big phobia, big
Yeah.
taboo.
Today, it's the inverse. Everybody's depressed, but to say
You're
the
talking
devil's
to
in
the
my
devil.
head, well, you don't want to say that. It's super interesting how that is inverted.
Right. So yeah. So that was that experience.
Well, let me ask you something. How did the devil get in your head? Do you know? Do you know when that started?
That goes all the way back. I think it's epigenetic.
Okay.
See, I had my first, what is a suicidal machination? Um, wouldn't, I don't know if it quite qualifies as a suicidal machination, but at at around the age of 9 or 10, my dad kept handguns, not a lot, but he had kept one or two tucked away here and there. And I was 9 or 10 looking at it. I was always fascinated by guns. And because I told you as a kid I wanted to be in the military and all that. Anyway, growing up on Audie Murphy movies and John Wayne and all that. But I'm looking at this gun, it's loaded. I'm saying it feels good, it fits in the hand nicely. It was not very big, but just felt this impulse to put it to my head and want to pull the trigger. Just
Wow.
no rationale to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a one off. Okay, that's a theme.
Hmm.
So,
But when did you
uh
first hear the devil in your head?
Baptist church, Baptist
Interesting.
church,
Huh.
because it was fire and brimstone all the time. We started the Baptist Southern Baptist Church. He's a great preacher and he's a good man. He'd ultimately asked me to leave the church, but he was a good man and he was a good pastor.
Hmm.
He was doing the best he could, I think.
So
But
you got the devil out of your head at the vineyard, but then the depression was still in it. So now you had to work on the depression.
yeah, and I think the devil in the head thing was an outlet for the depression.
Okay.
Looking back, trying to work it, sort it out
Hmm.
psychologically, it was probably, which my Buddhist friends found that probably made sense. It made a lot of sense to them
Hmm. Hmm.
because they work a lot with the mind, particularly the kind of Tibetan Buddhism I played with. It's understanding the mind, understanding that basically from the Buddhist perspective, we're just layers of an onion, in an onion. It's just peel one off and you just got another and you keep going and keep going and keep going until there's really nothing. And that's where you start to get to something real.
Yeah.
But uh, the Jesus perspective that on why I'm here is as a Christian and not a Buddhist. I'm not here to push Buddhism. Is that where Jesus tells the disciples they kick some demon butt and they come back feeling good and he says, well, don't rejoice that they listen to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there is an essence in Christ and Jesus. There is an essence
Yeah. Yeah.
that the Buddhists can't see. And maybe other religious traditions can't see either, but in Christ there is that.
Yeah.
And so
I
yeah,
think
that's it.
I think just like with the strange inversion of the devil and depression, I mean, part of what I mean, the generations of our wives also were you know, hang in there with the marriage. And you know what, part of what we talked, I won't mention his name, he'll listen to this probably, and he wouldn't probably mind if I mentioned his name, but his thesis, given the story that he shared, is that it's sort of the opposite of your thesis, is that, you know, she is the hill I'll die on. And his thesis is too many men are dying on that hill when what they should really do is get out. And of course, you know, having a conversation with him with respect to this, it's by no means a cheap conversation because
Mhm.
he fully owns the consequences of his take on that. And actually, I should have him on the channel again to talk about this thesis because I think it's an important thesis. And to me, it's part of the thesis that most of these, what would we call them? Like this sort of a mimetic idea that you had, she's the hill you die on, versus no woman is worth dying on that hill for. It could be sort of
Oh,
the opposite of it.
yeah. No, that's, oh my gosh, that's so opposite. I can't even imagine getting, why would you get married if that's, if you, I just don't know why you would not, marriage becomes then just a transaction,
Well, it's this different vision of marriage
radically different.
because,
Yeah, I'm
and I
too much
think
of a romantic. I,
well, yes. And another one of his pieces are that men are really the romantics because men are the ones that it's what marriage does is excite in a man his hero's journey, and she is his hero's journey.
Mhm.
I mean, it's like that. It's like that moment in um, The Incredibles where Frozone is looking for his super suit, and his wife says, "I am your greatest good." And it's all that, and that marriage for a man is the hero's journey, and he is there in a very Ephesians way to lay down his life for his wife. And I mean, part of what's being tested in our culture is exactly that, and whether that is in fact um a godly thing to spend your life in that mode. Now, I think this is also connected to the a secular view which sort of truncates the world at death for us, which that foreshortening makes this life all that matters. And when this life is all that matters, then suddenly you must have your best life now, which means it is both unwise and irresponsible to spend your life, to
Mhm.
spend your hero's journey on a
Yeah,
wife that will never finally fully be the sum of all your joys and dreams. And
yeah.
so in this way, sort of the masculine hero's journey and the feminine journey are because I mean, what's been happening with women in our culture has been transforming too.
Hmm.
And many of them have sort of, it used to be that the man's hero's journey was to your wife is your greatest adventure. But women, by virtue of the divorce wave that happened in the 70s, they took a step back and said, hedge your bets by building a career because you can't finally trust the heroic in the men to care for you.
But for good reason,
Yeah, oh yeah. I'm
because
not
there were a
saying
lot of men who didn't live up to their vows, right? I mean
right,
it. Uh,
and a lot of women who don't too.
sure, sure.
And when I say that, I don't just mean I mean, men are slightly more susceptible to sexual infidelity, but women have their own ways of vow breaking apart from sexual infidelity. And that is again part of the argument of our friend because he's looking at a marriage that was formational for him where for the sake of the children, the husband should have rescued the children from the mother. And that does happen too. And part of the difficulty we have in a culture is in our culture, it's difficult to say that because if it's a valence between men and women, the woman must always be the moral superior, which is an ironic carryover from the Victorian age when women were males' moral superiors. And so there's a ton of pieces in this drama.
Yeah, it's yeah, hmm. I don't want I don't want my position to to seem so uncompromising that to say that there aren't male victims of infidelity. That's grossly insensitive and not true to the facts, as I've just anecdotally observed, right? But, but most of the time, most marriages fail, from what I've seen, because of the men. When it breaks for the women, it breaks. What I'm saying is the I'm not. I think Peterson points out that women initiate divorce at a higher rate than men,
Yeah.
but the marriage breaks long before the divorce or
Yes.
even the separation occurs.
Yes.
And what I find is that men start out with women who love them deeply, passionately, completely, and they whittle away at that commitment, that those feelings slowly over time, whether it's from flirting with infidelity to just neglect to insensitivity. I mean, some of it's, some guys will sign up for what's that one? Ashley something? It's a place for married people to find.
Oh, that website that
Yeah.
got busted into, and someone released all the
Yes, yes,
men who signed up looking to have affairs, that whole
yeah.
episode.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
They'll sign up to that and then still not, but then be totally outraged. And I got to be careful. But I know people who play with this
yeah,
and they do this and then they're shocked when their wives fall out of love.
yeah.
And then it falls apart. When I say, it's like go all the way back. Part of our discussion in Connecticut was we're having trouble with girls being attracted to boys. And I said, start out by, in a sense, making men out of them. Put them in uniform. Make them run. Make them become something that we know attracts girls. That's a start. And then ultimately, I said, one of the problems was in as marriages grow in time and children become involved, the husband loses rank. He falls down in the attention hierarchy. And that may actually become interpreted as a love commitment. There's a falling out of love slowly down, it's because the kids, you have one kid, oh, you're now number two. You have a second kid, you're now number three. This is the
Yeah.
husband.
And it
Fourth,
was
fifth,
interesting because you and I both got that. That was another conversation thread at Connecticut. And when someone was talking about how they fell in the rank of their wife, a lot of us with children sort of like,
that's the way it goes.
way it goes.
But it's not a pyramid or a hierarchy up and
Right.
down. It's a
Right.
circle.
Yeah.
And what happens is oh yeah, 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 you're losing. You're down the list. In a bear attack, your job is to put yourself in front of those kids while she protects them and runs.
That's right. That's right.
And if you're bear food, you just did your
That's
duty.
right. And that's what it means to be a man.
And that what it exactly. Now, if you manage to survive the bears and all the other beasts and creepies out there in the world that take us out, what you're going to find is if you stay put, you hold your ground and you keep loving her, the kids are going to go away. The career ambitions are going to go away. Retirement approaches. Starting to think about how I'm going to spend the next 10, 20 years of my life when I don't have a job and I don't have kids to worry about day in and day out. It's the two of you. It can be beautiful or it can be very, very sad.
Yeah. Well, we should talk in this about the transformation of love because someone in Connecticut they gave us the word of, I guess it's a technical sciencey word, so T. Grog would like it. They gave us the word about it's basically the infatuation portion of a romance. That's those it's the days when you fall head over heel in love with the other, and one of the things that love does, one of the things that marriage does, and especially having children together does, is it transforms the love. Um, and it isn't the sort of the standard Greek eros, agape, phileo. That has an aspect
Mm-mm.
to it, but there right away with the infatuation phase, there is agapic love too. You'll do anything for that person, and it's this point of massive projection on the other. Love is blind, rose-colored glasses, all of those things. But then, but then a different kind of love gets into marriage, which is you don't want the eros to go away, but eros is not at the top. Agape really becomes the senior thing. And again, I love the story that you just told because gosh, if there's a buzzkill on a honeymoon, it's having your husband fall into a significant depression. I mean, that is just complete opposite honeymoon. And at that point, correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't have any children.
No.
So she could have quite easily, and I think for many people, understandably said, I'm out of this because I now see that I have signed on for something that there was no full disclosure,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm rightfully allowed to get out of this marriage. It's a bad marriage. He's going to be way too much work, but she didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that sense, she also engaged in a hero's journey
Mm-hmm.
and said, shit, this is not the honeymoon I signed up for,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm sticking with him. And she did stick with you.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if someone listens to those videos, you'll learn she's stuck with you through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And she continues to stick with you, even though, um, you
Now the
know,
big challenge is me going to church.
yeah,
Yeah.
which, and I
Even
mean,
though she was a she I mean she was the good girl, went to school, went to church, I mean Christian school, church, Christian colleges and church her whole life, she was actually, when she met me, she had just fallen out of what was a semi engagement with a future pastor in the Nazarene church.
yeah. So she hung in there for you and
Yes.
for the kids.
Oh
And
yeah.
I mean, I love there's this Netflix show that I was really sorry that they only did it 2 seasons. It was basically the story about when the FBI started figuring out that psychological profiling was helpful in finding serial killers.
Hmm.
Ironically, that comes into this conversation. But one of the things, so the FBI basically establishes a profile, and one of the interesting things that they discover is that in many cases, it is the mother that forms the serial killer.
Hmm.
It is the kind of mothering
Yeah.
that actually the greatest sort of predictor of a serial killer is the way this young man, because it's usually the men are the serial killers, it's the way this young man was mothered in usually a really horrendous way.
Hmm.
And that tends to produce serial killers. It tends to set up the psychological matrix that will result in that.
Hmm.
But part of an interesting subplot in that story is one of the FBI guys. He's his marriage because of children. They weren't able to conceive children, and so they're going to adopt. But at one point, he says in that show, he says, because people are looking at him like, why are you sticking with this marriage? This marriage is hard. And one of the things he says is, in some ways, marriage is like a small business. And that's true. And I don't say that to reduce marriage to a small business, but I say that marriage, again, is one of these traditional institutions that is enormously broad.
Mhm.
And part of the difficulty of our current cultural moment is anything that's not explicit tends to be dismissed. And traditional marriage has a ton of implicit wisdom in it that is usually not brought up to the conscious level, which means that marriage is a place for romance and infatuation and that kind of romantic love. It's a place for sexual intimacy. It's a place for child rearing together. It's a place for finance and, to establish a house. And I mean, marriage is actually one of these traditional institutions that is so rich and full that actually each cultural slice only sort of initiate certain aspects of it, but it's a massive, massive thing, which is why when, as we've seen in our culture, when it is demoted or set aside or not, or people don't avail themselves to it, or at least give themselves into it, then other surprising things begin to emerge because the package, we never fully understood everything that was in the package. And so when new maladies start to arise, we think, oh, well, what's with that? And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing in the current marriage crisis today, that women were like, well, I'll just put off marriage until I'm in my mid 30s and have a fair amount of success, and then I'll find a husband. But what they don't realize is that, well, you're not going to accept a husband who's making less money than you. You're not going to accept a husband who has all of these things. So actually, by now, trying to get married at 35, you're not really going to get married, and you're probably not going to have children. And now there are all sorts of unintended consequences for your 50s, 60s, and 70s that you, being oh so smart 25-year-old, had no idea when you stepped off of the traditional institutions. And what with all the dislocation we have as a society now, we're realizing a bunch of these things and saying, oh no. Whereas some people who say did get married young, like in our generation, what our cultural moment pushed us to,
Yeah.
especially as Christians, because there was still a fairly significant no premarital sex, wait for the wedding night. It wasn't sort of twisted later like this crazy purity culture that was saying, if you wait till the wedding night, you'll have the best sex you could imagine,
Yeah, yeah,
instead
yeah,
of the much
yeah,
more real thing that you have two
yeah,
people who really don't know what they're doing. eh, what you're going to have to do is learn. Sexuality is also something that will take some learning. But in the midst of a marriage, it's going to be enormously complex. Yet what we I think the thing that our culture of experts still has not finally fundamentally understood is that the world is too complex for any of our expertise to actually fully domesticate the human being. That you can learn a lot of good things from a lot of experts, but the truth is that any given life
mhm,
is way too big for any particular expertise silo to deliver maximization with. In other words, I mean, you needed a whole bunch of different expertise to finally slay or at least
mhm,
tame the dragon of bipolar 2.
mhm.
But it is a myth that, well, you're just going to walk into a psychiatrist's office and he's going to give you a pill and it's all going to go away.
Mhm.
That was a long speech. Sorry about that.
No, no worries. A lot there. On the subject of love and marriage, if you endure long enough, my experience is that you move even beyond love. There's a new layer that is not even agapic. It's the two shall become one flesh. You're at this. Yes, it's the two become one flesh in a new child, but there is an emotional, spiritual level of that occurs, and it's just that neither of us feel quite right when we're not in the same space. Even though she goes away for work, or and we don't see each other for hours, but at night it's just that's home. You're together. You're just it's that's and when that's not there, and I'm in a hotel room in Connecticut or somewhere, no matter how great it is,
Or
I'm missing something.
even how mundane just being at home at night can
Oh,
be.
totally
I mean,
mundane.
and that's what's so funny about it because it is utterly mundane. It is not fireworks, but there's an utter banality, which is actually a good thing.
Hmm. Yeah. No, and that's so you see more of this stuff. New York Times, they occasionally you'll see somebody talk about having a vibrant sex life in your 60s or 70s or something like that as a couple. And isn't that wonderful? And they'll talk about all these lurid details. And it's like, this is what 40-year-olds think a great marriage looks like in your 70s. That's what the editors thought is good content. What you really want, and so for me, it's like, no, no, no. It's what we're just talking about. It's that plain, simple. Yes, okay, there can still be some of the slap and tickle, but
First mention of slap and tickle in my channel after 5,000 hours of video. Here it is.
woo, bringing the woo in a whole new direction. Woo. Um, there's that. You said something else though that I wanted to talk about, and I'm afraid I lost the signal, so maybe it'll come back. Keep talking, Paul. What do we got? What do you want to go with
Well,
this?
I want to talk. Actually, one of the things I want to talk to you about is this morning I'm on Twitter and I come across Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in a video where he's talking about one of the yellow dyes that is really poisonous, but the FDA has not gotten it out of our foods. And he's talking about, because like part of his whole shtick is what I would call the counter narrative medical world, which is and when I saw that video, I recognized that in many ways, now we're going to get into politics, which would be really fun with you. Um, Donald Trump Jr.'s re-election is another revenge of the boomers in an interesting way.
Hmm.
Because, it's long been noted that the difference between Donald Trump and William Jefferson Clinton has never been that great.
Right.
Um, I mean, Donald Trump is not really a conservative. There's very little conservative about Donald Trump. He
Hmm.
hasn't negotiated his marriages in a conservative way.
Hmm.
He doesn't maintain his money in a conservative way. Now he's a business guy, but I remember when he started running for the Republican ticket, a lot of people noted that what kind of Republican is he? And
Hmm.
he has a lot of populist and sometimes labor friendly points that he makes, his anti-immigration. I mean, there's a lot of interesting elements to that. But then Robert Kennedy Jr., who of course is the son of a 1960s icon, the son of a 1960s martyr, and Robert Kennedy Jr., I mean, part of his, when he's, Robert Kennedy Jr., in a funny way, is one of those quintessential boomers, now older than you and I,
Hmm.
because really we're just at the end of the boomers. So
He's a
we're
true
not,
boomer. He's a true
he's
boomer.
a
We're
true
we're
boomer, not like you and I.
we're edgy,
Right.
cuspy. Yeah.
But he never bought big pharma. And I know a lot of that super anti-Vietnam, the true boomer generation, that there's going to be bra burnings and flag burnings and protest, and we'll never trust big pharma, and we're never going to trust the government or the man. And in a way, the Kennedys were the epitome of that, of course, but then they themselves became, you know, they then inherited the kingdom and had Camelot. And so part of what's super interesting about this moment
Hmm.
is the boomerization of even non-boomers, like someone like Brett Weinstein and Heather Hying. And, even Jordan Peterson in some ways. because almost all of the IDW cats are disillusioned boomerality people
Mm-hmm.
that say that the rebels let down the revolution, and
Mm-hmm.
in just inconceivably inverted irony, now Donald J. Trump leads the revolution, and that I'll pull up. I know, isn't this just insane? I'll pull up the because it just all came together for me this morning. Let me share the screen. Um, you know, this whole thing and this, so here you've got Russell Brand, you've got Donald Trump as George Washington. I mean, if there's any ever a man that is not George Washington, it's Donald Trump. Um, um, none of Donald Trump's wives were Martha Washington at all. And
Well,
now
it's a
you've got
man.
Russ.
He bragged he bragged about his tour of duty in Vietnam was escaping the clap or whatever it was.
Exactly. Exactly. He didn't even have to go to Canada,
Right.
like the other draft dodger, Bill Clinton. And
Meanwhile,
so
he talked trash and unrepentantly about again for me a real man like John McCain who
yes.
had the opportunity to get a negotiated exit out of a North Vietnamese prison cell and would not leave until they let his men go.
Yes. And I when he attacked John McCain, I mean, I thought that was the end of his candidacy in
Yeah.
the Republican Party. Because for me, regardless of what John McCain did as a senator, for me, I mean, you told the story of your father. For me, John McCain, that's what a man
Oh my
does.
gosh. Totally.
That
Totally.
is what a man does. That is a
Totally.
man. And just like you said, in a marriage, the woman is the hill a man dies on. The family, there's the hill the man dies on. The reason you don't divorce is because you don't cut and run.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how difficult it is. You know, you are, I mean, and again, I think as at our generation, especially as Christians, Ephesians 5, the woman submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit to your husband. Husbands,
Love
you
your
lay
wife.
down your life for your wife. There's the hero's journey.
Mhm.
And for our generation, you know, that just that just fills us with, it just fills us with everything that feels like being a man.
Yeah.
And, and so and we are living in the strangest times. And
Well, I pray this. This is what I'll do because I don't want to leave this part of the conversation with the man having just one reelection and the feelings of the coroner being what they are, at least a lot of it.
well, I don't know
I
that
want to
there's
pray. Now, I just
unanimity
want to
in
make
that, but
sure
go
that people,
ahead.
because no, you're not going to get the shit. I'll get the shit for this because it's just assumed Mark's the socialist, bad guy, leftist, whatever. Um, no, my prayer is that Donald Trump, it may have taken him how old was it? 78 years to get to a place where he's discovered what it is to be a man. Maybe now he's it. And I pray that he understands better. He's met real men. He's put medals on them, real soldiers. He's met young John McCain's, and even though he says bizarre things sometimes about no, look at her. She still has a beautiful face and all this. She's still intact. And I've, seen these poor guy. He's expressing sentiments, and it's very possible he's expressing sentiments in an awkward way that come out one way and he means something else. I'm going to grant all that. And I'm just going to pray that he now knows what real men are and that he will, he's going to inhabit that. So I just, because there's a great line. I love this line too much to not quote it when I have the opportunity to talk to your audience. Um, did you ever see the movie Matewan?
No.
It's old, it's quite old, 80s or something. But it goes back to the Cold Wars in the 1920s between the Union and And
What's the name of the movie?
Matewan, Matewane, I believe.
Okay.
Matewan. Um, and there's a character named, he's the town marshal, and his name is Sid. And Baldwin Phelps Agency, big tough guys, private, they're kind of like private enforcers for the coal company. They're in town and um, they show him they have this writ to allow them to uh, remove unionized coal families from the company housing, right? So they're just dumping these people out onto the uh, front yard, and it's a whole big uproar. But it's happening within city limits or town limits, and the marshal shows up, Sid, and he says they tell him, "Well, we're here with the Baldwin Phelps Agency and the so and so, Mr. Phelps," and Sid says, you know, he, this guy, this head of the Baldwin Phelps boys thinks that he's going to get 100% support from the town marshal, and the town marshal says, you know, I wouldn't piss on him if his heart was on fire. Uh, I don't know what it means, but I got a good. It's got if you graph the sentence out, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but yet it communicates. And after with when you know, so yeah, there's a part of me that feels that way towards Donald Trump, but he's president of the United. He's going to be president of the United States for 4 more years, and God help him. Pray for him every day. Pray for this country. Let's get through this and pray for peace and success. So even though I probably still feel like Sid.
So May Twan, 1987 American historical drama directed by John Sayles. The film is based on the true story of 1920 coal miners strike in Matwan, West Virginia. It follows union organizer Joe Kenihan, played by Chris Cooper, as he attempts to unite miners of different backgrounds against the oppressive coal company that controls the town. The film depicts the tension between the miners, company enforcers, and infamous Baldwin Phelps Detective Agency, highlighting the violence and the struggle of labor movements during that period.
A lot of good corner themes in there too. One of the young protagonists who's telling the story is um, uh, a would-be preacher in the little church. So there's a sermon in there, and you get, but it's rich. It's very
I'll
rich,
have to see it. I'll have to see it.
and
I'll put it there with
examples
my
of manhood.
recommendation of Meet John Doe. Everybody's got to watch Meet John
John
Doe.
Doe.
So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah. So you know, one thing I wanted to talk to you about is really fresh on your should be fresh on your mind. This talk about sacred, the stuff, the content you've been producing just the last day or two, and um, and the what the sacred is and what makes the sacred, and the kind of bloodletting that produces um, the making holy of something in the world. And it's the idea that Pageau came up um, saying that in the post World War II age, it's Hiroshima and it's Hiroshima and Auschwitz basically, or Hiroshima and
yeah,
the bomb and the Holocaust.
and lots more. Normandy would be hallowed
So,
ground. I mean, military cemeteries are hallowed ground.
but I think what really crystallized it for me when you guys were talking, all your they're talking, you're talking, it's the whole production, just it's dawned on me why Donald Trump is such a bridge too far for so many Democrats is and why so many folks who support him don't, particularly younger folks, don't understand it, is that it is Auschwitz, it is Hiroshima, it is D-Day, it's the Trumpism is plowing through it. But it's not, but see, there's a whole lot more that preceded it. That you're it's an iconoclastic movement.
Yes, I think that's true.
And
But
those of us who want to hold on to our icons, it's almost Catholic Protestant in the Elizabethan era
yeah,
level of tension.
yeah.
You're really attacking you when you start looking to Dugin, the Russian philosopher, or Putin as an example. We're now it's we're the Democrats represent the papists and the Trumpists represent the Protestants, if you will, tearing or the iconoclasts.
Hmm.
And you're going at the very heart of what it is, not just to be a man, but to be a human being in the modern age.
Yeah, yeah,
That's why we feel so threatened.
yeah.
Now, is it rational? I'm not, that's a whole different discussion, but I think when what you were talking about, what Pajot hit on, hit the emotional button for me. It went, I'm starting to, it's coming into focus. And the beauty of a time like this, these moments are to be cherished. I've learned with old age, we've lost the election, big change, right? And for all of us, there's going to be a clearing of the deck, there's a spirit of something that just, it's an opportunity. Suddenly it's like the air after a spring rain. It's just suddenly there's a new level of clarity. We can see things very briefly and have new ideas and see things in a new way, afresh. Even things we've lived with for a very long time. And what I see coming out is that, yeah, I'm starting to, I understand now why I wouldn't piss on that man if his heart was on fire. I now understand. I'm not saying that to justify it. I'm saying that so that people understand, the audience will understand, the corner will understand the passions at work. People, you start questioning the legitimacy or denying the legitimacy of claims about the Holocaust. You might as well. It's the same as what would be the
Is Trump a Holocaust denier? I hadn't heard
he's
that.
surrounded by people. I mean, I'm just saying that part of that movement includes that. The whole IDW includes some of this stuff. I mean, it's you had that you had
Who in the IDW is a Holocaust denier?
no, there's that guy who did an interview with there was a recent interview. Tucker Carlson interviewed
Oh,
a
that
pseudo historian who
yeah,
has a he's a podcast historian.
that whole dust up, and Benjamin Boyce got into that. Um,
It's not that it's but see you have guys like Miller who is a Dugan scholar. You have um the flirtations with Orban in Hungary and of course people rationalizing Putin's invasion. You said you this is bringing in politics. Putin's invasion of Ukraine, right? That you don't understand how NATO pushed him, and George W. Bush. We pushed NATO right up to Russia. You know, rationalizing these things. What I'm saying is rather than debate the particulars, which we could go on and on and on about, what I'm saying is what we're talking about is the sacred. This is what I got from your content in the last couple of days. This idea that our icons are are being attacked, and that's probably what is motivating the Trump derangement syndrome, so called, in Democrats and liberals.
I think the Trump derangement syndrome is much more. associated with the I think you're right in that Trump is an iconoclast, but I think a lot of the iconoclasm he has been rupturing has been a certain facade of respectability and waspy Protestant restraint. So, for example, people are talking about Donald Trump's sexual ethic. If you look at John F. Kennedy's sexual ethic, I mean, just absolutely abysmal.
Mhm.
But the the sort of the waspy keeping up appearances meant that reporters protected JFK's sexual secrets in the same way they protected Roosevelt's
Right.
wheelchair.
Hmm.
And so part of what happens in the 60s is, again, I think the counterculture is an iconoclastic tradition that says, no more, no more, no more will we protect JFK's sex life. It's all going to be out in the open. In fact, we're going to have everything out in the open at Woodstock. I mean, I was, and this is where the narratives get interesting because when I heard, I don't remember if it was Jordan Peterson or if it was Brett Weinstein or it was somebody else who basically said that this little event that they did on September 29 in Washington, D.C., this was going to be the Woodstock for their generation. For
Yeah.
me, it was like strange. It's like, no, Woodstock was I mean, because the iconoclastic solvent of the counterculture intended to rip away the facade that was hiding corruption. And what they weren't prepared for was that if you rip apart facades, you'll see a lot of ugliness, whether it's hiding corruption or not. And so, in that sense, Donald Trump is a child of the counterculture
Mm.
in that there was no facade on him. You know, he, he wanted to sleep with porn stars.
Hmm.
He would cheat on his wife and he would sort of and so in that way Trump is a really interesting figure because on one hand he's sort of a child of the 60s and says I'm going to dispose of the facade.
Right.
No more of the air of respectability that covered up Marilyn Monroe sneaking into the White House
Hmm.
or covered up FDR's wheelchair.
Hmm.
No more of that. I'm going to I'm going to say what's on my mind about whatever I think and I'm so beloved someone, I could shoot someone on 5th Avenue and they wouldn't arrest me. So there's that. But yeah, part of but then there's also the layer where he and Bill Clinton as draft dodgers is also there
Hmm.
because the whole draft dodging thing was an element to rip away the facade and say, in a sense, no more kayfabe. We're going to really hit each other in this movie. But the levels of kayfabe kept developing. So therefore, unlike John McCain, these guys, Bill Clinton goes to Canada to avoid the draft,
Hmm.
and Donald Trump has daddy's money to avoid the draft. And John McCain goes to Vietnam and gets captured. And John McCain is a senator's son. Remember the songs. I ain't no senator's son. He is a senator's son,
Hmm.
and he still goes. And so, what I see us doing as a nation is basically continue to process these images, icons, and narratives. And this is where it gets super confusing
And the
because
guy who's the senator's son, well, and this is his, he was the admiral, and he was the admiral's son who
that's
was in
right.
command of the fleet
That's right.
making war on Vietnam.
That's right. That's right.
And but McCain's now the bad guy
Right.
in this whole narrative.
Right. Well,
I
and
mean,
and
it took. I mean, the lefties who had nothing good to say about John McCain 20 years ago.
right.
They're weakly holding him up as a standard, as a hero, only because he was attacked by Trump and Trumpism.
Right.
Uh,
And
Sorry.
that's where it's almost impossible to follow the narratives
Yeah, it is. It's too much.
because, I'm gonna I pulled out on Twitter this morning. I once again pulled out. I'll put it up on the screen. I think this is Jonathan Peugeot's best tweet. Um I'll share the screen. If you want to build a civilization, you cannot do so on words like dark, rebel, and heterodox. By using these identifiers, you can criticize existing systems effectively, but you will never build anything of value and coherence. So, part of what we're struggling with are foundations. And when we look at John McCain and the sacrifices he made for the country, there's something foundational in that for us. But part of what the counterculture in the 1960s did to undermine that was say, and this didn't happen until after America was sort of shamed by the way America shamed Vietnam vets,
Mhm.
was to say, regardless of, John McCain was still a good soldier. And it is honorable to be a good soldier even for a bad cause.
Mhm.
So we sort of made that move in America in the late 70s, early 80s. But of course, when Ronald Reagan comes in, you sort of have a recycling because then you have a new conservatism coming in with Reagan. But again, Reagan was Reagan the first divorced president of the United States?
Mhm. I think
So,
it was.
so there was a degree of kayfabe with Reagan as well. And
Mhm.
of course, Reagan was an actor. And so, I mean, part of what's so difficult in our age, and the internet just accelerates this, is people are longing for the foundations, the truth, which I think is part of the reason why there's, you know, tremendous interest in orthodoxy. And if you're going to be a Catholic, be a trad Catholic,
Mhm.
because people are hungering for old things because they want out of the swirling. They want out of the swirling inversion after inversion after inversion after inversion, and they're seeking the sacred as foundation. And there is something to the fact. I mean, Jordan Peterson, what fueled Jordan Peterson's status rocket was the manliness of him saying, the government of Canada cannot compel my speech. And if they take me to prison, I won't eat their food. I'll have a hunger strike. I mean, but it's in the same way the same sort of authenticity that, again, remember during the Vietnam War. Now, you and I were too young to
Mhm.
really remember that clearly, but we remember it
Our
vaguely.
memories of it were maybe the escape out of Saigon. That's
Right,
probably, yeah.
right. But remember early on in the Vietnam War, the self-immolation of that Buddhist monk, the
Hmm.
picture of that Buddhist monk lighting himself on fire. And so in this postmodern era that says there's no such thing as a foundation, we suddenly, meta modernity arises because we realize we must have foundations. And so then suddenly authenticity and profilicity and sincerity all sort of go into a swirl where, well, due to lack of foundations, John McCain showed us something. And um, Jordan Peterson showed us
Mm,
something. And
yeah.
then the question is, of course, with Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, can we trust them? Do they have skin in the game? And so,
Or
and this,
Kamala Harris.
or
It's the
Kamala Harris,
same.
yeah,
That's
another
the
great.
always people or Barack Obama. It people the thing what I noticed something that came up. I went to a prayer meeting last night, and of course the folks at my prayer meeting were all very happy, feeling really good about life because their guy won. They're winners, and that's all good,
Especially if you're in California and he wins,
right?
because he only got a third of the vote in California. So
Right. Uh, but they one of the things they started, they couldn't stop themselves. They're so happy, but they're thoughtlessly talking about things, and then suddenly out comes a rumor about. They start discussing rumors about Kamala Harris's um, uh, paternity or her something about her tracing her background. They're kind of doing a birther. Somebody had done somebody had read something, and it was a kind of birther type of content. I saw a video or read an article or something, and basically doing a whole birther routine on her, and questioning her mother's something lineage or whatever. And I'm like, oh, part of me is like, why go there? At that point, I want to. And at that time, I'm good. I'm relaxed. Yeah, I'm so happy for you guys. I want you to be happy. I'm happy you're happy. I can live with that. And at that point, it really becomes hard to hold, to bite my tongue, to not make it an issue, to not say, "Come on, stop, stop, stop. Let's talk the facts."
she already lost.
But she lost.
Just let her
Yeah, why do
slide
we have
off
to?
into the
We're
history
gonna
books.
dance on the corpse.
Her political career is probably over.
Yeah, now she'll make lots of money. That's what happens. And God bless her. Let her have it. That's fine. All good. What? Then I had to reorient myself and say, why am I here? I'm here to pray. So I don't remember what I was responding to, why I talked about that story, but oh, it's this whole thing about in we have real good reasons to question the character of Bill Clinton. We have really good reasons to question the character of Donald Trump. You have to reach for Kamala Harris, but they do. They talk about Willie Brown and when she was younger.
But Bob Dole. So
But
there's a World War
there you
II
go,
hero.
Bob. Oh
George
man,
Bush Sr.,
yeah, no,
someone else from the good war.
yeah, no. Those people, their character, they may not have conducted themselves. No one conducts themselves perfectly, in or out of uniform. So you always find something to pick at. But these are real people, real substance,
But
people of substance.
this again, I know you didn't really come to this space via Jordan Peterson, but if you understand when Jordan Peterson talks about archetypes, this is what we're talking about. I mean, Bob Dole,
Hmm.
John
Yes, I see.
McCain,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
these are archetypes. And I remember when George W. Bush won the White House. I mean, the point was bring honor and integrity back to the White House because, of course, Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. Um, but again, George W. Bush, another draft dodger, you know, his
Of a sort. Yeah, yeah,
of
yeah.
a sort,
His dad got him into the National Guard or something like
right?
that. Yeah.
So he didn't avoid the military, but he avoided Vietnam.
Hmm.
And but then George W. Bush had his bona fides were also a connection with Billy Graham.
Mm.
because he and Billy Graham had to walk along the beach. So so part of what's happening is we are these archetypes are moving around.
Can I throw something at you before we run
Yes.
out of time? Okay, right along these lines. Here's the problem I'm seeing within the corner. Would you agree that these archetypes we need these archetypes?
Yes. We do sense making through them.
Okay,
We decide because how much do either of us know about any of these political figures that we see on TV? Even after the 60s ripped apart the curtain.
right.
So, yes, we use these archetypes.
And men like you and me, we've lived them out through our marriages, you through your vocation, career. Um, our younger people, how what do they call it? It's LARPing or kayfabe or whatever? What's what the various? I'm not fluent in
You're not
corner
fluent
speak.
in Griswold Grimm speak?
Yeah, it's pretend. It's man. It's Bob Dole. That was a real man.
Yeah. Yeah, because he and I mean they both bore in how they walked around, you could see what the war cost these men.
Right. My dad, a real man. I mean, well, you didn't meet him, but if you'd
And
met him,
and see Mark's video on his channel about his father.
yes. Um, how do we help the younger guys? We if they say they're converted, they're buying it. We want these archetypes. We want to embody these archetypes. How do we move them from live action role playing into full integration of these values of this archetype into their lives that they are now it? Is it through marriage?
For many, it will be. I mean, that's the difficult thing now in is that for men and women, marriage and children grow us up like nothing else,
Oh yeah.
either through achieving and succeeding or through failure. Because in either way, in either case, and of course, for all of our lives, there's both success and failure. And often we learn more through our failures than we do through our
Oh
successes.
yeah.
But in either case, it's that living that, bestows wisdom. And now, again, another little ism that I've had, the sign of a good culture is it bestows wisdom on those who have not had the physical years to accumulate it. And
Right.
so, what you and I are doing right now, and I think this is in a lot of ways, I'm super interested to see how this video is received. This is going to be fascinating. But what we are doing right here now
Right.
is trying to afford wisdom to the youth. Because you and I, late boomers that we may be, almost Xers, are now coming into that time in our life when we are the elders.
But I've had people come up to me and I never had this before, only when I came into the corner actively. Where people would say, "Oh, what you have, that's wisdom." And always set my teeth on edge. I make
You do have wisdom, though.
But it
People
makes me
hear it when you
nervous.
talk, but your wisdom is hard earned
Yeah.
because
Whatever I
you've learned
have,
a
I
lot of it through failure.
yeah, 100%. If my side won the election, I wouldn't have heard you at all about what Peugeot had to say about the sacred. If I'd won, my side had won, I'd be all high on the dopamine and whatever else is going on in my brain. And it's like, oh, Peugeot's talking. Wah, 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 wah. That's nice. But no, this time it hit. It's a failure. Absolutely. Love
Well,
failure.
well, Jesus, again, I know people love the Great Commission at the end of Matthew. It's a fine verse. My favorite is the beginning of Acts.
Hmm.
The disciples are there. Jesus is resurrected. And they ask, now will you restore the kingdom to Israel? Now will you make America great again? Now will the people of God and the Holy Land of God be first among the nations like Deuteronomy says it should be? And Jesus says to them, it is not for you to know the times or the hours, but you will receive power from the Holy Spirit and you will be my witnesses. And what that means is the what I hear people say all the time is, how can I make so and so, talking about a person, X?
Hmm.
And I want to keep saying, you really can't. You cannot make them wiser. You cannot make them whatever it is you think they should be more of or less of. You cannot make them that. God in Egypt pushes over the Egyptian empire like he's pushing over a statue. No big deal. Then he brings Israel into the desert, and you begin to see now the real work starts. And it doesn't end when they come into the promised land. It doesn't end, it doesn't end, it doesn't end, because the real difficult thing is the formation of an image bearer into the image of God. There is the hard thing. And so, what Jesus says is what you need is the Holy Spirit,
Hmm.
and then you be his witness. But here's the difficult thing. And this ties in the marriage part. What does being a witness of Jesus cost? Because I know there's a bunch of hippie-ish ideas around that Jesus was a flower child. Um,
Jesus Christ Superstar,
that's
some
right.
really good music.
But Jesus limited, I think Jesus limited his ministry to 3 years because that's all the world could take.
Yeah. If
That's
three. If
just
three.
that's right. That's all we could take was when
Hmm.
he opened up the vision of God just that far.
Yeah.
Even the people in the world who should have been most prepared to see it, because they had had the law and the prophets, and by the time of the first century, they had finally kicked the habit of foreign gods and statues. So the aperture gets opened a little bit, and that instinct around Moses, which is shut him up, you go up the mountain and come down and tell us about it.
Yeah.
He comes
Yeah.
down the mountain, and before you know it, kill him. Romans could agree, his own people could agree, shut him up and get him out of the way. So, and again, the first chapter of the Gospel of John says it perfectly. We love the darkness. And so, what can we do? It's exactly what you're doing, Mark. You are being his witness.
Mm. Well, along those lines too, I've been in Acts 2 just the last today and last yesterday, and it's Acts 9 particularly was this morning jumped out at me was I'd like to read if I can find it without taking too much time, but it was where this it's the spirit of or Jesus actually appears to the brother in is he in Damascus or Antioch? I think it's yes, he's going Paul's going to Damascus, gets hit by the Lord, right? But then there's a somebody in is it Ananias or who's the guy in
Ananias.
yes, he's going to he gets a word from the Lord telling him what to do with this Saul who's just been told what he must do and how much he must suffer for my name's sake.
Right, right,
The
right.
witness, but he's also been told there's a it's going to come at a cost.
Yep.
and that's it. That's I don't know why. I love that, but it's and then we think also when you're talking about the Lord and the presence of Jesus on earth. And I go back to Joshua 5, and it's the captain of the Lord's hosts appears before Joshua. You with me or you with my enemies? He doesn't answer that question at all.
Yes.
There's a but and that's Jesus.
That's right. That's right.
With the Rome, you're with Rome, you're with the Jews,
Right.
Israel.
Right.
We're going to restore the kingdom. Going to restore. Going to. Are you going to fix the world? Jesus is playing a whole different game, just like the Captain Lord host. He's got a plan. Yes, you're going to play a part. If you listen and you do as you're told, you get to play along.
Yep.
But he's working some whole other scheme.
Yep. And Paul then at the end of Ephesians, you battle not against flesh and
Mm,
blood. And that's
no,
why Donald Trump is not the enemy.
no,
Kamala Harris is not the enemy. You're not dealing if you see someone with skin on them and they're a human being, they're not the enemy.
right.
The enemy is working through these people. And this is what we have to, so we battle not against flesh and
Yeah.
blood. And so what we're fundamentally doing in this world of costly cruciform witness, is our exorcisms. That we're loosening certain spirits' grab on people, and letting the Lord of life
And not
take
get
them.
allow ourselves get used by the enemy.
Yes, yes.
That's the really hard one. And I've been struggling because the you talked about I'm at this odd little church that doesn't seem to fit with my personality or my beliefs, but I'm here. And yet, and then last night, again at prayer meeting, at where I was paired off with my brother-in-law or my cousin-in-law, my pastor, because what we do is it's a whole routine. We do a large group prayer, then we break into pairs and we pray for each other for specifics. And while talking with him, we pray, we do our thing, back and forth. And I said, well, there was still some activity going on, so we were in a lull. And I felt liberated by the Spirit to actually say something that had been on my mind, trying to figure out how to navigate it. I said, look, I told the corner on one of my streams recently. My family's gay. We're very gay. We're very far out left woke, whatever you want to call us. But I'm affirming. I'm a what CRC people call affirming for very specific reasons, local to me, within my household, under my roof. Okay. Um, I'm seeing and I'm sensing some some spiritual work happening. My daughter and her trans partner started going to a church a little bit, the UCC, literally across the street from my church. Okay. UCC, for those of you who don't know, United Church of Christ, which is full on rainbow flag flying. Whoa.
About as liberal, Protestant, woke as you can get.
Yeah. And I said, I'm sensing, and my wife is starting to show a little more flexibility, even as we were talking about, her sister showed up recently and asked, well, why aren't you going to church with them? My wife's going, don't start that. But she, the problem is maybe even could be to the point where that church, she might go to a church with, but that specific church, with that specific posture, which is very conservative, very socially conservative, We got a few Bible thumpers in there who, if they saw a man in a dress, what appears to be a man in a dress, I should say, will be on them like stink on a skunk with, you need to get saved. I'm not doing that to my family. Sorry, ain't gonna happen. And I said, I'm here at this place. I'm starting to see some loosening up. Me doing this for 3 years is starting to show its effect. Me doing this is starting to show its effect at home. Now, it may be 5 years out. I don't know. But if it's tomorrow, I want to have a church that's ready to catch them. If you're not up to it, I completely understand. But I would like us to come along. I don't need to change you. I don't need you to change. But we need to be we can't be fostering an environment that is openly hostile to the people who I love the most. And I can give you a very sound scriptural argument for why you should accommodate. Now you don't have to agree, but I guarantee you I have as much scripture to back me up as you have to back you up. If you want to go Bible Bible answer man to Bible answer man, we can go back and forth and make that argument all day. But here's the situation I'm in now. Just this is just food for thought, and this is why I told him it's food for thought, something for you to think about. But pray on it and search out how if we can. If you can't, just tell me and we'll go. It's done. We're fine. But if you think we can begin to accommodate, and his answer was interesting. It was nuanced. It was, I can't see how we can bring him into leadership, but we need, we're going through First John right now. We must love our, you know, if you, his framing was, you're not saved if you're not loving your brothers and sisters. Was his approach to it. So who knows where it's all going to go, but I don't know why I told you all that, Paul. Sorry.
Well, I think these two edge boomers break the corner. I think that might be that might be what this video is. I mean, what live wire haven't we talked about? We talked about marriage, we talked about Trump, we talked about gays in church. I mean, this something like this might even bring CW back.
The
Who
House of
knows?
Woo, the House of
The
Woo,
House of
come for
Woo.
healing,
Yeah.
come for when you're ready to receive the Holy Spirit, we're going to be there for you.
I think we've offended just about every corner of the corner in this talk.
Yeah, I hope not too much.
No, I don't think too much. Well, and that's part of the reason you have a corner, so that probably nothing that was said on this video will surprise anyone who listens to it. Because they know us to a degree. And they expect some of this.
I might hurt your reputation though, because there's a lot of people in the corner who've not heard of me. My subscriber base, I lost a couple people after I mentioned abortion in a live stream, but it's like 108 people. You got thousands. So there's thousands who've not listened to me at all.
I lose people every day. It's true. My channel it's been very interesting because my channel it hasn't been declining, but it's not been growing at the rate that it normally grows. But yet on Twitter, I've added like 50 new followers in a day. And I'm like, the truth is, we have no idea what's going on behind these scenes.
No. So should I rejoin Twitter?
I don't know.
Serial killer Mark.
Cereal, Cereal. Make sure you
Yes.
get that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the bots might not let
That's true.
let
Yes,
it
with a
in.
C.
So
Yes, with a C. Yeah. I was thinking about I needed more of a handle though, and I was thinking Fruity Pebbles. The problem is figured out it's if I said don't call me Fruity Pebbles, well that sounds kind of homophobic, but if I said call me Fruity Pebbles, that has a twist, but that connotes other things too. So, you know. But serial, it's we'll see. But
Well,
anyways, this was fun.
you're doing a great job. I mean, you're doing live streams, and you and Ron sort of have a, you and Ron Copperman sort of have a buddy thing going right now. And
Yeah.
I love, you're about the same age, and you've got enough similarity in your stories to get some traction together, but you've also got enough difference in your approaches. I mean, Ron has sort of left a bunch of things behind, and he's much more straight down the line,
Mhm.
conservative evangelical. And you, of course, are how you are. And so I love the buddy energy that you and Mark have, that you
Well,
two
it's
have.
good. And then Tayo gets in the mix some. Tayo's been showing up a
Yeah.
lot on
Well,
my live
Tayo,
streams.
Tayo's like a universal adapter here.
Oh, I
Tayo,
know.
Tayo loves everyone.
He
So
does. And he pops in and pops out. If you notice, he'll join the as soon as somebody else joins in, then he just blips out. It's like, come on, Tayo, stick around a little bit more. No, Tayo's wonderful. Tayo is great. Luke Thompson, awesome. Luke Freeman. I haven't seen Luke Freeman in quite a while, but he was one of the first guys to really be encouraging to me and show up and talk and a really sweet
well,
person.
and when you were thinking about sort of dumping all of this and walking away, I often don't necessarily try too hard to keep people in, because sometimes you need to walk away for a while to come back and actually do better. But in your case, because you kept saying things like, well, people in the corner, well, it is true that there is probably a majority in the corner who are sort of conservatively politically leaning. But as the last election just shows, that's a majority in the country too.
Mhm.
So that shouldn't be a surprise. But actually, the corner is way, way more diverse than
Oh
most
yeah,
people see, because we only see usually a lot of the guys who have channels.
right.
And some of those are pretty conservative guys, but you just look at Grail country, and politically, I don't I have no idea how to figure out
I
someone
know.
like Nate Heil or Luke Thompson in terms of American national politics. Just got no idea. Um,
Yeah.
you can't pin
No.
them. People would want to pin them as progressives, but no, and it's because
Yeah.
they're anarchists basically. And so
Right.
how do you can't, anarchists just refuse to be placed on the map. So
Yeah.
no, you have your
It's
place here,
Sherry,
Mark.
and then there's Sherry has her perspective. She have you? This is a complete aside. Have you noticed how much Sherry's has begun to embrace her role as chief matriarch of this space? She's her voice, the way she engages everyone is so much more authority just in the last year.
Yeah.
Because came on, I'd come on once in a while early on, and the guys might be over talking her, and she kind of let it happen for a while. I mean, she was pretty assertive, but still, it happened. And I don't see any of that anymore. And now she comes roaring in like a lioness, and you know, in my woo talk, it's Spirit of the Lord is on her sometimes, and you're going, oh, stand back, pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. She is embodying the matriarch archetype. She really is.
She is.
Well, and her
She is.
sister, well, you heard that. Her sister
Huh?
basically told her she was all, and her sister basically said, knock it off. This is who you are. Be who you are.
Yeah.
Stop playing around with your own insecurities and imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
great.
she is. Did you ever watch my Randos conversation with her, the first one?
No, I didn't even know there was one. Can you link it in
Oh,
the comments or
yeah.
something? We'll find it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's deep
It must
in
be.
it's deep in the back catalog. It'll probably be a little hard to find, but it is back there. Someone recently dug it up, because whenever someone leaves a comment, comments come serially in terms of time. So when someone reaches into the back catalog and watches a video, and so
Oh,
Phil Nickerson, Nicholson, when he was entering the corner, So all of the Randos conversations are in the one conversation playlist. It's got like over 600, over 500 videos in it. And
Okay.
so he watched them all. And it was so cool. And every time he'd watch one, he'd leave a comment. So I could see him going through the randos. And that was like, yeah,
So you have a randos list, a active playlist that's got all the randos in it on your channel?
look for the conversation
Okay.
playlist on my channel.
Okay.
It
I
now
will.
not all of them are low status randos. There are other conversations with, probably there's some Peugeot and Vervaeke videos in there. But if you go through that list, you will probably get most of the randos who agreed to be recorded and agreed to have it on the channel. There's a few
Okay.
that have come down since then, but
Right.
because sometimes people need to have their randos conversation taken off. But he went through all the old ones, and that's a really cool thing. But
Mm.
if you do go into the back catalog, make sure you leave a comment. It can just be so that I
Just a
see
ping.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because what
Okay.
happens with YouTube is most of the videos watched at any given time are the newest videos. And so even though the back catalog does get watched, it's really nice when people leave a comment because then I can see, oh, someone's squirreling around in the back room here looking at all the old stuff because there's a lot of gold back there.
I will look. I'll look that up. What stuck out in your mind most about that first encounter with Sherry?
Well, you have to hear the story of God knocking her over on her face
Okay.
because it's a great story.
Mm.
And and what's been really cool about this whole journey is that a lot of the early adopters, Luke, Sherry, Job, these guys are still around.
Hmm.
And there's one of the question about what exactly are the gospels. Not too long ago, someone wrote a really good book on it called The Eyewitnesses, The Gospels and the Eyewitnesses. And he tracked very carefully all of the name dropping that happens of randos in the Gospels.
Hmm.
And he came to the conclusion, this is a super prestigious academic, that what these name droppings were hyperlinks to the communities where these people were known and often still alive to validate that these stories about Jesus are not just legends, they are historical happenings. And there are eyewitnesses that will say, I was there, I saw the miracle, I know the guy who got healed, he lived right over there, or his mother or his kids still live over here,
Mm.
which completely undermines the attack on the Gospels that they are legendary.
Right.
And, for you and I who believe in the woo, that's not hard for us to believe because
Right.
people are like, miracles don't happen. And it's like, you just haven't been in the right rooms.
Hmm.
Because,
Yes, along those lines, I went through a period where I was full on T-Grog, and it was probably not a great period for me because it was, but it was also part of my processing of not of getting out of the mental, dealing with the bipolar. And for a period of time, it was I'm shunning all of the woo,
yeah,
right? And I T-Grogged it, but of course, depression just got worse, and um, and then I started finding things even within Buddhism, particularly Tibetan Buddhism. You cannot you cannot not I put you must embrace the woo at a certain level to be a practicing Tibetan Buddhist.
yeah,
And I kept going, but then I go, there's just it's too, and we call it the woo or trip. It sounds trivial. Maybe it's too much trivialization, but I'm just saying it's there's a layer to existence that's just inexplicable.
yep.
Um, and along
That's,
these lines with the Gospels, there's a book that Neil Jordan Daedalus recommended, Case for Christ or Case for Jesus, which is really
the
good
Lee
along
Strobel
those
book.
lines. Case for Jesus. It's let me look it up. Doesn't sound right. Let me look.
It's one of those apologetics books that's out
Yes,
there. Yeah.
Brant Petrie,
Oh, I don't know that one.
um, Case for Jesus. It's a good short one. I've never been a big person for apologetics, I guess, until recently, but this caught my fancy. And he begins with authorship, and he points out a really good detail about uh, the the textual critics that they miss. That for one of the myths that's told, pushed by Bart Ehrman et al., is the anonymity of authorship of the Gospels, and he begins right out the gate by pointing out, "Well, show us a manuscript that is not ascribed by an author. That's anonymous. There are no anonymous manuscripts. They don't exist. The theory that they were anonymously written comes
Oh,
out of folklore studies in anthropology and stuff.
oh, interesting.
And the problem with that logic is that folklore, as they've studied it, is something that generates over a period of centuries.
Right.
Whereas at the most, we're talking 5 decades or
Yeah.
so for the Gospels.
And I think the Gospels are very early.
I agree.
And I think the reason why a lot of people think the Gospels aren't early is because their presuppositions say, oh, you can only explain the little apocalypse in the Gospels if they already know that the Romans destroy the temple.
Right.
But I think that if in fact the Gospels were written after 70 AD, that would have impacted the rest of the writing of the Gospels. And I don't think it does.
Mhm.
I think the Gospels would be different if, in fact, the temple had come down and the church was in the very different place that it was after the destruction of the temple, because that Jewish revolt was an enormous climactic episode. And so I do believe that these Gospels are very, very early.
Well, and that revolt was decades in the making, right?
Yes. Yes.
When you, so it's not even a great prophetic stretch
No.
to predict that you're going to lose all of this if you keep this shit up
Yes, yes,
because
exactly.
these people don't mess around.
Yes, everybody knew that about the Romans. I mean, it took basically zero understanding, and that was all the anxiety that many, in terms of the aristocracy, that was the anxiety they had about Jesus, because Jesus is going to
Exactly.
mess this up, and so we have to
Exactly.
stop him.
It's tenuously held together as it was without Jesus.
Right.
Enter Jesus, and it all gets crazy. Of
Yeah.
course, they're. Well, and the thing is see, just look at how the Romans dealt with their own soldiers. They disciplined legions through decimation.
Yes.
If a legion broke, if it failed in its duty against the Germans or whomever, what did they do? Pull lots, 1 out of 10. Okay, everyone. I don't know exactly the process, but let's just say count off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then start over all down the line. Okay, threes, you're it. The rest of you attack the threes until they're dead. That's how they discipline. Beat them to death. You're going to beat your brothers in arms to death, and that's how they fix their legion problem. That legion will not break in the front of in the face of the enemy anymore, or it won't revolt, won't mutiny, won't do anything. That's how they enforce loyalty to the people they trusted the most to keep the empire together.
Yeah.
They were well, Tom Holland, right, points out these people were savage.
Yeah.
So when Jesus says there's not going to be one stone left upon another about the temple, well, I don't want to disparage Jesus's prophetic abilities, but it didn't take a genius to see that as a possibility
Right.
with the zealots running around and everything else going on. It was, yeah, the Sumerian auxiliaries around. That was what was mostly enforcing the law in Herod's and stuff. Yeah, they weren't much to look at, but the guys that came in with Vespasian and so on, those were some tough
Yeah.
cookies.
Yeah, they were the best armies in their world for how many centuries? I mean,
Yeah,
it's an amazing thing. But you're right.
truly.
It was bought with, again, back to the sacrifice. It was bought at enormous sacrifice.
Yes.
Sacrifice your brothers.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Well,
Maybe that's
thanks,
a good way,
Paul.
place to land the plane.
Land the plane with Romans and Roman
Decimation.
law. Roman, and that's the law. I love the fact that it's the law that Paul says. Uh, what does he say in Romans? That they're not in power for in vain. That the God is behind this
That's
even
right.
more.
The authority has been, and that's
Thank
something
you.
that, and again, when I look at, gosh, this we're never going to end. I can talk to you forever, Mark. That's just, um, it's so funny because Christians who are complaining about whether they're complaining about Biden or whether they're complaining about Trump or
Yeah.
whoever, Christians, serious Christians, like you talked about earlier, you pray for your leader.
Hmm.
And even though, and because when Paul writes about it, these are the leaders that are going to kill him.
Hmm.
That's the same royal family that will put Paul to death, and Peter. And both Peter and Paul say, pray for those in authority because God has basically given them the authority. And so now, well,
Well, we've heard it 100 times already on TV. I heard it last night in church, in the church building, the prayer meeting. That's God, oh, the American people have spoken. And it's like thought about it, like going, no, it's God who's spoken. I know, and it was God who spoke 4 years before this and 4 years before that. This, yes, this is we have a process by which these guys enter office, but it's God who one man waters, another one man plants, another man waters. It's God who gives the increase.
that's right. And if you read, so I've been reading Kings because I've been preaching in Kings, God raises up Jeroboam, and Jeroboam is a mess. And God raises up Omri,
Hmm.
and Omri's a disaster. And then Ahab, and the fact that Elijah is sent to Ahab, it's people think so two-dimensionally with this stuff. And when you read the Bible about, it's extremely nuanced. And
Yeah.
Ahab does worse than even the sins of Jeroboam. And and so he sends prophets, and I mean, it's God is in the middle of all of this drama. So
But we've discovered, or the anthropologists have discovered that Omri, that was how the nations around Israel named the northern kingdom.
yeah, House of Omri,
And
even centuries
Ahab, and it
later.
was apparently a very successful economically
Yep,
and somewhat militarily successful kingdom.
yep,
They were independent and thriving for
yep.
2 or 3 generations.
Omri made Israel great again.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Paul. This is good. I really appreciate the time. This
All
was
right,
fun.
Mark. We'll talk to
God
you later.
bless. All
Bye
right.
bye.
Bye.